Between 2014 and 2019, 6,557 people lost their lives at the hands of police, those employed to protect and service. Of those 6,557 people, 25% were Black. The problem? Only 13% of the United States population is Black. So why are the numbers so disproportionate? I spent the month of September interviewing and learning from 3 Black men who have spent time incarcerated in the Michigan prison system and have since rehabilitated their lives. They shared with me their experience, what it's like being a Black man in America, and how they're contributing to their respective communities and trying to be part of the change. But I wanted to give you a different perspective. So I took the time to interview Officer J Rob of the Detroit Police Department. And I got to ask him what inspired him to become a police officer in the first place. How has the current racial climate changed his experience? And what he thinks we can do to make things better, not only as a society, but even within the police department. We talked about Black Lives Matter and defunding the police. And I even brought my son, Sean. He wants to be a police officer when he grows up. I gave him the opportunity to ask Officer J Rob some questions. So I hope you all enjoy this interview. I really hope that you listen to it with an open mind. I hope that it sparks positive conversation, but really more than anything, I hope it ignites some change, some positive change. What's up? It's your girl AB, and this is another episode of 30, Flirty, and Thriving. I am here today with Officer J Rob and special guest Sean. Thank you so much for coming on today. So we're gonna kick off today a little different than what we normally do. Sean here is gonna kick off the interview with a few questions for Officer J Rob, and then I'll take it from there.
Starting off, what inspired you to be a police officer?
Actually, I was inspired by a couple of negative occurrences with the police. Both of these were early 90s incidents.
Yeah.
So we had one here in Detroit, an incident involving a gentleman by the name of Malice Green. Something went wrong during a police investigation and he ended up dying. Different people are going to have different interpretations of what happened. So that was one incident. And then the one that's probably more known, more popular, was the one actually caught on video in LA, which was the Rodney King beating. I think that one is more popular because it was caught on video, and that was long before everyone was walking around with cameras and video cameras everywhere. So those 2 negative incidents are actually what inspired me to become a police officer, or so be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah. Out of what you just said, what do you think are some major flaws in the justice system?
Wow. Well, with the justice system, nothing is going to be perfect all the time. We have a democracy here in America. We have a system where an individual has their right to trial, but there can be flaws in everything. Nothing is going to be perfect. You can have a situation where an individual is completely guilty of sin, but if you have a jury trial, you may have a group of jurors that can sympathize with what that person goes through in life or something like that, and they may rule in his favor because that's what their hearts say to do, but it's not based on fact. And also people, whether it's police officers, judges, whomever, everyone is their own individual person. So your occupation doesn't make you the perfect person. So me being a police officer, I'm nothing more than whoever I am. I just happen to be a police officer. So if I'm a lazy person, I'm going to be lazy at Ford. I'm going to be lazy at the bakery. I'm going to be lazy in the hospital. I just happen to be a police officer. You know, if you're a judge, you know, if you're a poor plumber, if you're a poor construction worker, then you're going to be a poor judge. So a lot of it boils down to the individuals, and it's just not going to be perfect. We can just try to make it the best we can and try to weed out the imperfections as we go.
Do you get any hate from being a Black individual?
Individual police officer?
Yeah, individual as a police officer. That's what I mean.
Yes, and most of it comes from Black people. Sometimes, and I don't want to say all Black people, but we have that certain, and that's one thing that you have to remember, especially here in Detroit where I serve. Okay, 80, 90% of the people that I serve are black people, and of those 80 or 90% of those are good, hardworking people who are just trying to make a living and get by. But you have that small fraction, that 10% of the people that cause 90% of the problems. So if you're a citizen and you're not doing anything wrong, you know, everyone makes a mistake and drive badly, okay, fine. But those 10% of people cause 90% of the problems, and they're doing wrong, so they're the ones who typically have a problem with you.
All right. Ending off with a good question, what is the best part about being a police officer?
Anytime you get to be a voice for the person who can't normally speak for themselves, or just doing something that you know has made someone else's day easier. Like back when I would do narcotic raids, and we would hit a house that was a nuisance, and of course people on the block aren't going to throw a party for you, but when you finish, or even while you're there, if that person riding down the street who lives down the street and is bothered by it, when they ride by and they kind of look and, you know, give you the thumbs up like, yeah, you know, that makes the day. If you having someone driving crazy and you pull them over, and a person who a couple miles down saw them driving crazy and said, man, I wish the police was around, and then you come down a couple lights and you stop them and they go by and say, yeah, he was driving crazy, you know, things like that. Anything you can do to just make someone's day easier, or be the voice for the person who can't voice it themselves, those are the good parts.
Thank you for answering my questions.
You're welcome. Those are some good questions.
Okay, so thank you so much for answering Sean's questions. I know it was important for him to be here today, being that he wants to be a police officer when he grows up. We recently visited DC for the March on Washington, and one of the topics was, do you still want to be a police officer with everything that's going on in the world today, and being here part of kind of the repercussions of what is considered to be police brutality against black people. Mm-hmm. So let's backtrack a little bit. He asked you first, what inspired you to be a police officer? Your answer was not, oh, I just always want to grow up and be the good guy or save lives. It was because of some adverse experiences. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what those experiences were, or how exactly it inspired you?
Well, as far as the LA incident, that eventually inspired. It wasn't the beating; it was the subsequent acquittal of the officers, mm-hmm. which led to the rioting, which was maybe a year or so later.
So, were you already an adult at that point, or
Yep.
was this when you were a child?
I was an adult. I was
Okay.
in my early 20s when that happened. I just always felt that I had the type of personality. I'm a people person, and growing up, I'd had good experiences with police officers. I can remember times playing basketball on the street, and police officers would pull up and just watch us play. Mm-hmm. So never any bad experiences. So you kind of see what the experience should be like. And then when you see the negative incidents, like the Malice Green here in Detroit, and the Rodney King in LA, and probably countless others that I'm not aware of, those are the things that makes you say, okay, you know what, that shouldn't be that way. Maybe those people should not have handled it that way. So let me be a part of the solution, not be a part of the problem.
So that inspiration came from you wanting to be part of that solution then?
Correct.
And just changing the way that the things or the kinks in the system that you had witnessed, and you felt like, okay, there's got to be a better way.
Correct, because anybody can sit back and moan and groan like most people do. Shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, anybody can do that, but why don't you become part of that change? If things need to be changed, okay, instead of walking around throwing bottles at buildings, breaking windows, why don't you be a part of that change?
Mm-hmm. So you've been a police officer a majority of your adult life?
Actually, yes, at my age, I've actually been a police officer longer than I've been living, so, yep, but yeah, actually almost half, so.
Yeah, okay. So obviously things have changed over the last few decades.
Yes.
How has things changed for you internally in terms of how you felt coming into law enforcement, and how you feel after having been in it for, half of your life, or more than half of your life?
I think essentially the mission is the same, to try to help people to be the voice for the person who can't talk. If you're the old lady on the corner and the guys are selling drugs in front of your house, you're not going to tell them to move or don't sell drugs from my house for fear of repercussions. So my mission is to get them off of her corner, to make her day a little easier. So that mission hasn't changed. I think over the years I've become smarter as an individual. I've become maybe more sensitive to certain things. I mean, I certainly wasn't rich, but growing up, we were okay. You know, my mother worked at Ford, and she raised my brother and myself by herself. So you know, we did okay. So it wasn't until I became a police officer that I realized that there's a struggle out here. I realized that everyone might not be able to afford blinds and curtains for window treatment, so they can only use a blanket or a sheet or a towel because that's the best they have with what they do the best they can what they have. So big picture, it opens up, and you know, you're able to see different sides, and that puts me in probably the best position, because as a police officer, and in these times an African American police officer and a police officer who grew up in the city, I can see things from all sides. So I can see the right and wrong. I can see the hood way of doing things. So I can see, and that's a very unique position. And you know, obviously I work it to my advantage as much as I can, because not many people can come from that perspective where you can see all sides. So that's absolutely an advantage.
Because of everything going on in the world today, is your job harder in certain aspects? And when I say everything going on in the world today, I'm talking about the racial tension, particularly when it comes to police.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. The focus has gotten mixed up. So first, let me preface my comment by saying this. All police officers aren't for all police officers. So what I mean by that is, if you have a police officer who's bad or horrible officer doing things that they shouldn't be doing, talking to people in a way that they shouldn't be talking, that only makes my job harder. So obviously, police officers, we want the bad ones weeded out. So the public thinks, to get it twisted, that we're all in the same and we're going to look out for each other. Not true, because if Sean is a police officer and he stops you and he talks bad to you, cusses you out, and snatches your documents from you, then you're going to have a mindset of police officers. So when I stop you, even though I'm not like that, you remember how Sean treated you. So you have that mindset. So now we're already probably getting off to a bad start, because you're going to remember what happened before and not what's going on now. So we're already behind as of starting on an equal plane. Also, in today's times, what I've seen is it's given people the notion that they can do whatever they want to do, even though they're wrong, clearly. And it's okay, because they can scream police brutality, they can scream George Floyd, you know, they can scream Breonna Taylor, and it has nothing to do with, you know, you ran a red light and you don't have a license. You screaming George and Breonna has nothing to do with the fact that you chose to get into a car without a license, driving crazy because you weren't smart enough to drive right without a license, but you're screaming, and they're two different issues. So don't try to cloud it and use what's going on in today's world as a platform for you to do wrong. And that's basically what's going on. People are trying to use it as a platform and an okay to do things that they shouldn't do. Even simple things like traffic stops. A lot of times now when I do a traffic stop, a person, they'll either call someone on the phone to have an open line, or they're actually videotaping me, or Facebook Living me at the time, which is fine. I don't have a problem with it. If I was doing something wrong, I'd have a problem with it.
Right.
But I'm doing everything right. I'm very courteous.
Do you think a lot of that is out of fear or out of like social clout?
Social clout.
To catch something?
Social clout. Some of it is legitimate fear. Okay. And that bothers me because my whole thing is to be courteous, not to be extra. My job is to simply, if you commit a traffic infraction, okay, my job is to stop you, approach you with courtesy and respect, let you know why you're being stopped, ask for your documents. That's my job. My job is not to be extra and say things that shouldn't be said, and which is one of the hardest things about being a police officer, because I'm only my person doing this job. So there are times when Jay wants to say what he really wants to say, but the officer has to be professional and not say it. So that's one hard thing about my job, because sometimes you have to cut to the core, and sometimes you got to tell people stuff that they really don't want to hear.
Right.
But if it's true, then it has to be said.
So there's a lot of talk about police reform and defund the police, and the police need better training and stuff like that. Do you think that there could be some changes made within the system that would reflect better to the public or in how things are handled on the streets?
I'll say this. Police officers and maybe the system is not perfect. However, I think there also needs to be some education on how the public handles things. We're supposed to be in a civilized society, and there's a way to handle things. If I stop you because, in my opinion, you were speeding, or whatever technical tools I have to assist me in saying that you were speeding and you don't think you were speeding, okay, we don't sit there and fight it and argue about it on the street. You don't get out the car cussing me out and we get into a fist. No, that's not how we handle it. I write you the ticket, which is nothing but a piece of paper exchanging hands. If you think that you were speeding and you were, okay, you paid the ticket. If you think you weren't speeding, we set a court date and we talk about it in court.
Right.
What happens is you would never win with confrontation on the street. That's just not the way to handle it. And if we could pick out certain incidents, now I'll say two things. One, I don't Monday morning quarterback what another police officer did in a situation, okay? Maybe that officer felt that at that time they did the best they could with what they had. Another thing, people shouldn't be persuaded by a 15-second video because something happened before and maybe even after, but you're only privy to like this middle 15 seconds.
But some people would say, regardless of what happened, it's not okay to kneel on somebody's neck when they're saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, mama save me, or things like that. So what do you have to say to that?
And that's true. But I will say, a lot of times we focus on the aftermath. And my solution would be, whether it's through church, through school, through whatever social means, a little more education. So before it even got to kneeling on his neck, did something happen where it could have been handled a different way? Was he not complying, or was the officer rude to the point where it struck a nerve in him and he wouldn't comply? I don't know. So, you can look at videos and you can see a lot of incidents, and even me as a police officer, I can sit back and watch an incident and say, yeah, the officer was wrong on that. Or I can sit back and watch a video and say, if the citizen had just cooperated, we're not even having this conversation. So just because I'm a police officer, that doesn't mean that I can't be real and call it like I see it. I'll bring this one up. The incident in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Okay. I'm watching a sports show, one of my sports talk shows I like to watch in the morning. And the commentator mentioned that, and I can't think of the young man's name who was shot.
I think it was Jacob.
Jacob, okay. Oh, Jacob was shot 7 times in his back in front of his daughters and blah, blah, blah. Okay, they're playing on that in front of his daughters, okay. I'm not that officer. I wasn't there, okay. We're taught that when you fire your gun, you can't catch that bullet and say, nah, give it back, okay. So once you squeeze the trigger, you felt what you felt at the time that you needed to shoot, okay? If at a later point you double think it, or someone feels that you shouldn't have, then you have to deal with it. But when I watched, and again, the 15-second clip, okay, the police were called there for something. Don't know the details. I haven't even dug that deep into
I
it.
think there was, from my understanding, it was some Caucasian neighbors that were fighting, and he was trying to break the fight up.
Okay. So when the video picks up, they're on one side of the vehicle, okay? And something's happening, and now he's walking away from the officers, and it looks like they're trying to tell him, come here or whatever, okay? So he's walking away, and he walks all the way around, then to the other side, where they're telling him, come here or whatever. One officer already has his gun out. Then he opens up his door. Then he reaches in the door.
Yeah.
So first, let's back up. Let's go back to the other side of the car. So his behavior with the officers there, that's teaching his daughters something that they can grow up with. You know, so while you're saying, oh, he was shot in front of his daughters, well, what about how he's acting in front of his daughters? That has the same impact. Okay. Then his actions, he's ignoring orders, if that's what they were telling him, because I don't think you can hear the audio. And again, I don't know, I wasn't there, so I'm just, so if I'm wrong, don't crucify me. But then he goes from the back of the passenger side up around front to the driver's door, opens up the door, and then reaches in. So if we haven't already learned something from what's been going on, it's kind of like, what are you thinking? So at that point, now, then the officer shoots him. Okay. Would I have shot him? I wasn't there. I mean, sure, it's easy for me to sit right here and say, well, I would have handled that different. Yeah, it's easy for me to say that. I don't know what that officer felt, what he saw. He did it, and now he has to deal with whatever is going to happen.
Right.
Okay. But before we even get there, if he had just cooperated a little bit, and if there's an investigation, because you got to remember, when police officers get to a scene, we weren't there. Most of the time, we weren't there. So we're relying on information from you. Okay, what happened? And that information is opinionated. So as a police officer, you're coming. You know, it's like me coming to your house telling you where your furniture should be. You have your furniture in your house in a certain place for a reason, because that's where you want it, or it's better for the TV to be here. I don't know, so I can't come in your house and tell you where to put your furniture. So as a police officer coming to a scene, third party, I need to talk to people to find out what's going on. And if someone's yelling, fussing, cussing, and not, helping me help you, then I don't know. And again, I'm not saying police officers are perfect. If you have a police officer who, prior to becoming a police officer, worked at GM and he had a bad mouth and didn't know how to talk to people at GM, he's going to be a police officer and not know how to talk to people. Same thing. But if people knew how to better handle things on the street, at the scene, on a traffic stop, there's a way to deal with it. And if you're not satisfied with how that officer is speaking to you or dealing with you, you can call 911. You can have that officer request a supervisor, and they have to do it.
Yeah, I've
So
seen
again,
the
I'm
videos
not saying-
where they do
yeah,
that, and the officer
yeah.
is like, no, you don't need that right now. Like,
And it's your absolute right to have a supervisor come.
and that's good to know. So earlier I asked you, when people pull out their phones and they're, calling someone, or the Facebook Living, things like that, did you think it was out of sincere fear or more social clout? On the flip side, do you feel that police officers are now operating with a heightened sense of fear because of everything that's happening in the world, and making them potentially more prone to reach for that gun a little quicker?
Yes, absolutely. That police officer in a situation where they probably have every right to shoot or pull out the taser or whatever, now they're thinking, man, do I want to be the next one on CNN beating somebody, especially a white officer? And I don't know what's harder, patrolling in a black city. I don't know if it's harder to be a black officer patrolling black people or being a white officer patrolling black people.
Yeah.
Because they want it both ways. Because this is what I get all the time from black people. Oh man, the white officer let me go. I've been in Sterling Heights and Fenton, and they just told me, call a licensed driver. But then white officers get, man, you just doing it because you white. Black officer let me go. So it's like you can't have it both ways. So back to your question, there is a little bit of hesitation. Also,
so you think there's more hesitation to using like blunt force versus?
No, I think less. Because I think police officers are probably scared to do, and I don't want to say scared, but less prone to do what they probably can do. I think they're, in big picture, it's going to cost the public. normal situation where you have officers who are proactive, who go out looking for guns and drugs, and to try to keep the streets clean, because here in the city, the guns and drugs are probably two of our most biggest detriments. You see guys hanging at the party store, a bunch of guys, and an officer may have wanted to be proactive and say, hey, let's, check them out, see if somebody does something, maybe one of them has a gun. And if one of them has a gun, now you're saving somebody's life, or you're saving the family's trip to the hospital, okay? But nowadays, it's kind of like, call us later if you shoot someone. We'll react after. So I think you're going to see the proactivity lessen.
Gotcha. So obviously, without the uniform, without even being in the city, you're traveling on vacation somewhere, I don't know, Colorado, whatever. You're a black man. You get pulled over, you're a black man. You go out in the streets, you go to the store, whatever, you are identified as a black man in America. And you deal with whatever that means for you and whatever your experience has been. You here in the city, you got your uniform on, you're a police officer, blue life, black life. Do you feel that you have a better understanding because you kind of understand both worlds?
Yes.
Or do you feel like any added responsibility because not only are you a police officer, but you're a black police officer, and there are expectations of you because of that?
Being black, you understand. Being a police officer, I'm certainly held to a higher standard of personal conduct than maybe the average person is. So yes, I have an understanding, but on the other side, it double dips me, because I can't react like a person would have normally reacted in a certain situation. Let's say I'm out somewhere and, I don't know, you get into a little scuffle or a fist fight with someone. Okay, if it's just two regular citizens, they go their separate ways and it's no big deal. But me being a police officer, now it is blown up. And, so I can't react like most people do. And I would probably say that this job has probably saved more people from getting their mouth blew out than if I worked that forward in the plan or something, because the consequences are so different. Yeah. I've been called names, people drive crazy, cut you off, but you have to think big picture. I have a future, have some bills to pay, have a career that I'm not trying to throw away, but the average person can react like that. So you have to check yourself. Now, just as an African American, I understand this too. You have to ask yourself, why am I viewed this way? Okay. As an African American male, even though I'm not part of that problem, I realize that I bear the burden of every negative thing that an African American male does. We all have to bear that. So for every professional, for every Barack Obama, Dr. whoever, a Chief Craig, and a regular outstanding police officer, for every positive black American, I realize that there's an amount who gets all the publicity. The ones who are killing people uselessly, the ones hanging on the corner with their pants sagging down, looking like, so I get if a person who doesn't know me, if I walk into an establishment, they see black male, they don't know me, they don't know J Rob, I can understand where their thinking comes from, but I also understand that they have an obligation to not judge me and let my behavior dictate the treatment that I get. Right. So I understand both sides.
I think, you said something key there, is that for every, amazing black person in the United States, the percentage that's represented, I think it's underrepresented, right? And the percentage of maybe those who aren't making the best choices are overrepresented. And it gives us us as in the entire United States, an unbalanced perception of the black community, thinking that, and that's where that judgment comes from.
Yes, and and I'll say we, but we're the reason why they look at us like they do. Black people act like black people don't do anything. That's what really kills me. Again, I'm not saying police officers are perfect. Okay, any situation where a police officer has wrongly killed someone or whatever, then they should be dealt with. You make that choice, now you deal with it. But here in Detroit, we have well over 300 homicides a year. A lot of it, and that's homicides. We're not going to even talk about the daily black on black crime, but that's okay. But the few times that the police shoot someone, oh, now it's all, we're all up in arms. Now we want to protest. There's an imbalance there, you know. In Black America, in a city like Detroit, we're 90% our own problem. You know, we're so busy trying to blame the police and the government and the white man or whatever. We're 90% our own problem, because if you get carjacked on 7 Mile and Greenfield, I doubt very seriously that it was some white kid that came from Livonia and carjacked you. It was probably somebody from 7 Mile and Schaefer that carjacked you.
Which I think is a whole, I mean, that's a city issue, a systemic issue. I think that goes beyond really anything that can be solved right now.
Yeah, it's not an overnight solution.
For sure.
But I think as African Americans, we need to look at ourselves and say, okay, why are we perceived this way? What can we do within to change? You can't blame someone's perception, because we put the perception out there. And so until we change and we become better individuals, okay, then we can start moving forward. So you know, let's it's like being in a relationship. If a relationship is going wrong, sit back and look at yourself and say, okay, am I doing right? You know, do I bring her flowers? Do I bring her candy? Do we go out? Okay, yes, no, change that, and then go from there.
Do you believe that there's any truth to the perception that for whatever reason the white kids who are doing the bad things, like you said, if you get carjacked on 7 Mile and whatever, it's probably a kid from the city, not some white kid from Livonia or whatever. But if you look at, okay, so a lot of young black kids get a rap for what? Smoking weed, selling weed on the corner, stuff like that. Whereas the white suburban kids are the ones who are doing like the harder drugs and having the raves and like the crazy stuff, but they're not held accountable to the same standard that young black kids are, nor do they have that bad of a rap. The same 15-year-old white kid, you know, who's popping Molly and having these raves is not going to be looked at as badly or put in the same amount of trouble as a black kid who got caught selling a dime bag on the corner.
Absolutely. But here's the caveat to that. If you know this, then why put yourself in that position? For example, I would say black kids probably have to be twice as smart, work twice as hard to be on a even plane. Okay, so this is something we already know.
Absolutely.
So why even put yourself in a position? Why are you out there doing these things? Because you know. And I think a lot of it comes from the home, because a lot of times there's a lack of men in the home. There's a lack of strong leadership in the home. So you go out and you do certain things. But to that, I will also say everyone knows right from wrong. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say you go out and you carry a gun and you rob someone and you get caught. Okay, well, you can't blame your social economic situation on that, okay? Because you knew when you grabbed that gun, you knew what you're going to do, and you robbed someone. Okay, you knew it was wrong.
So do you think kids who grow up in the city of Detroit, like I used to do some mentoring downtown, and I would meet kids from different area high schools who would come downtown. That was their first time ever being downtown. They had never even been outside of the city of Detroit. So do you think those kids who, you know, grab a gun, rob somebody, who are born in the city of Detroit, haven't been anywhere outside, their parents maybe stay at home or whatever stereotypes there are, versus the white kid who kind of has been exposed to more, so they for real know better, because they're like, look, if you get caught doing that, you're not going to be able to get into that school, you're not going to be able to play for that team, you're not going to be able to grow up and be a judge like your dad or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Is it safe to say that, like, even though they know better, like they might not really get the big picture of knowing better because of their socioeconomic status, because of their environment? Because
you have to look at your examples. Like the white kid you just mentioned in your example, maybe he has the example of a father who's a judge, an uncle who's a doctor, mother's successful, whatever she is, that background. You take a kid in the city, who they have to look up to, a father who only comes by every now and then, a mother who may or may not work, and then she may not be there to be able to raise the kid and instill those certain qualities. So who raises you? The streets. So a lot of stuff starts within the home, but because the home structure is so jacked up. But again, we don't have men in the house for whatever reason. That's just a whole nother subject that we're not going to blow down. In my expertise now of traffic, okay, you stop a person who's never had a license, okay? So you break it down, the family structure. Well, they never had the uncle or the mother or the father to tell them the proper way to do stuff. They just see everybody else driving. They don't have no license. So if they don't have a license, they don't tell you, okay, we need to go to driver's ed.
Right.
We need to get you a license. Then we need to get you a car. They don't have that proper tutelage. So what do? They just start driving. And then they go buy a car. And then they get all these tickets. They don't pay them. And, you know, then it snowballs up. And it's kind of like when you're playing a game, as a football game as a kid, the score gets so high that nobody knows what the score is. So you start over. You know, it spirals out of control,
right? Because
there's no structure in the home. You know, there's no one to tell you, okay, we're going to get you some proper training, then you get a car. And at some point, the cycle has to stop. It's got to be at some point, somewhere, somebody's got to have the sense enough to say, okay, this is wrong. I need to. The cycle has to stop.
For sure. And obviously, I mean, this problem is huge and it's deeply rooted and it's nothing that can be cured overnight.
No overnight solution.
But if you could say something to two parts, if you could say something to the general public and also say something to the police officer as a starting point, where you think we could start, what can the public do to kind of help step one baby foot in the right direction, and then having police officers also one baby foot in the right direction?
For the public, I would probably say don't judge an individual officer and don't put them on the y'all status. When I say y'all is, if I'm talking to a citizen, you know, they'll say, well, y'all do this, y'all be tripping, y'all. Okay, who is y'all? Police officers. Okay, I'm me. I don't know what police officers, you know, because they put us all in the same boat. So then you have to flip it and say, okay, so like if I'm talking to a black female, okay, and I say, okay, so I'm in a category. Yeah, you're in the category. Okay, well, why don't I put you in the category? So let's think of some of the negative things that they say about black women. Okay, you lazy, you don't work, you're sitting at home smoking weed all day, ripping off your bridge card. You got 10 kids by 7 different baby daddies, and you work at McDonald's trying to get $15 an hour. Then they get upset. Well, that's not me. Well, I put you in the category, so you can't pick and choose. So if you're gonna put me in the category, so that's one thing. Deal with that individual as an individual, and as a professional. Yes, I have a professional standard as a police officer. And if you're not satisfied with that professional standard, then there's a way to dispute it. Cussing me out on the street is not the way to dispute it, because we never get anything solved by cussing each other out on the street. Because if I took the same standard, what if I put, just like the general public puts police in one category, but I can't put everyone in a bag. Just because the person I stopped 5 minutes ago cussed me out, I can't take that same hostility about that person cussing me out to the next person that runs the light. So I can't be mad at you because the person prior cussed me out. You know, you can't put everyone in the bag. I can't think of any other profession where you all get put in one bag. You know, it's like,
well, they say lawyers are liars, and I mean,
well, you know, like,
we're still law enforcement.
If you go to
the justice system,
if you go to the McDonald's on Grand River, and you get fries and the fries are cold, okay, man, I'm not going to that McDonald's anymore.
Right.
I'm going here. You don't say, oh, I'm boycotting all McDonald's because the one on Grand River fries are cold.
Right.
But one police officer does something, we all catch it. You know, police officers aren't necessarily for police officers, because for every bad police officer, that just makes my job harder. You know, so like I said earlier, if you get stopped and the previous officer cusses you out or talks badly to you, now you have that perception in your head. So if you get stopped again, now it's me, you halfway cussing me out first, and I'm a totally different person. I had nothing to do with whatever. I will also tell the public, be a little bit more educated. Today's society, where like everyone has a camera and everything is on video, be smart enough to know that it's like a movie trailer. You know, they show you the best parts of the movie, and then you say, oh, the movie gonna be good, and then you see it really sucks, and the parts that they showed on the trailer were the best parts. That's what it's meant to do. You're meant to see a 15-second clip of a police officer beating the crap out of somebody. You're meant to see that, and it's designed for you to form an opinion, okay? You never see the court proceedings where the guy had a gun and it went from wrestling with the gun, and now it's a, you know, life and death battle or fist fight to see who's going to get the gun. You just see the 15-second clip of the police officer beating the guy, but you don't see the, 15 minutes before, which is how we got there. So don't always be so easily manipulated. I would also say, take some accountability. If you're doing something wrong, how can you get mad at a police officer? If you don't have a license, never had a license, and you're driving crazy and I stop you, how can you get mad at me because you've never had a license, and then you drive and you don't even have the sense enough to drive right to not get stopped? So why are you mad at somebody else? Police officers, what do we need to do? I would probably say my best tool is how I communicate with people. And you have to be smart enough to know, always stay professional, start professional, because there's the term, to get respect, you got to give respect. Or if a person wants to go to 10, let them go to 10. Okay, you stay professional, but trust me, as a police officer, it's a whole lot more that you can do to make it worse for that person. Don't let that person take you to 10. If things go a certain way, it's not because me as a police officer started it and took it there. No, I was courteous. You took it there, and then that brought us to whatever happened.
Okay, so my last question is, to those individuals who have always wanted to go into law enforcement and are now reconsidering because of the current climate, what advice do you have for them?
I would say follow your heart. If you're becoming a police officer to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, then you be a part of that change for the better. So for every officer who doesn't know how to talk to a person, you be that officer who does talk to a person. For every officer who is quick to want to go physical, put their hands on you, hit you, whatever, you be that officer who's finesseful enough to de-escalate the situation. Police officers are supposed to de-escalate the situation, not take it up, and not everybody does that. I'm a police officer. I'm not so pro-police that I don't know that police officers out there don't do dumb stuff. Okay, police officers have done some of the dumbest stuff I've ever seen in my life. So I can call it that. Any police officer tell you that yeah, I've seen some police officers do some dumb stuff. But go with your heart, and again, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So for every video that we've seen lately, for every Derek Chopin that was kneeling on George's neck, don't be that officer. Be a better officer. You be that officer that handles it in a way that we don't even get to whatever led to that confrontation being physical.
So all the more reason for young people, particularly young African Americans, to get involved in law enforcement and be the change.
Yes, because you'll have that unique perspective, being the African American, but the police officer, and realize you're not going to please everybody. Okay, somebody's going to be mad at a decision you make, but you make the right decision. You have the perspective of who you are outside the uniform, but you have the obligation to do what you're supposed to do in uniform.
Well, thank you so much for offering your insight and coming on today. I appreciate it so much, for answering my questions. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we go?
You know what? We're just in a crazy time right now. Hopefully things will get better. I hope that we all learn from this. If you're one of those police officers that wasn't on the right stuff prior, maybe some things will change for you to kind of change your game up. If you're a citizen acting a fool, You know, maybe this is a way for you to change yourself so you're not perceived in a certain way. You know, we all have to be accountable. That's citizens and police officers too. It's funny how people want to defund the police, or the police shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that. When something goes wrong, who do they call? Us. Period. Whether you like us or not. Even the drug dealer's girlfriend calls us. When he beat her up, okay, she calls us. But when we turn around and arrest him for selling drugs, now she mad at us. So, you know, dealing with mentals, for example. When we come, we might not know the person is mental. So they say, oh, you know, you should send a social worker or something like that. Okay. Right. Then when you go ham on a social worker, who are they going to call?
Is the police trained to deal with mentally unstable individuals? Or do you feel like there's enough training for those instances? Because, you know, there's been a lot of that in the news too.
You can never have enough. You can never have enough training. Again, coming out of nowhere, you're getting third-party info. Okay, mental man doing whatever. Okay, so we know that there's a certain delicacy that we need to handle the situation with. I think people try to have it both ways. You know, they want to police in one capacity, but if something goes wrong, now it's all our fault. Okay, we are not perfect.
What
but
are
guess
your thoughts
what?
on having somebody on staff who is trained in social work or what have you, that could be on call and available to those situations?
But they would still need us there.
Well, for sure, that's what I'm saying. As a team,
If
part of the team.
if they can handle it, fine.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so very, very much. And that is a wrap. Thank you all for tuning in.